One late night text from my best friend's husband ruined a decade-long friendship. How wrong I was to tell her the truth. I never thought a single text could turn my life upside down. But it did. Emily and I had been best friends for over a decade. We met in college, survived bad breakups together, celebrated job promotions, and were basically inseparable. When she married Jake, I was happy for her. He seemed like a decent guy, charming, friendly, and devoted. We weren't particularly close, but I never had a reason to dislike him. That's why it was surprising when his name popped up on my phone late one night. My first thought was that something had happened. Maybe he needed help planning something for Emily or there was an emergency. The message was simple. He wanted to talk. At first it seemed harmless, but as the conversation unfolded, something felt off. He mentioned that things had been difficult lately, that he just needed someone to listen. When I asked if he had talked to Emily about it, he brushed it off, implying that she wouldn't understand the way I would. That was the first red flag. A feeling of unease settled in. The way he worded it, like I was someone special, different from his own wife, made my stomach churn. I kept my response neutral, redirecting him back to Emily, hoping he would take the hint. But by morning, another message waited for me. He apologized if he had made me uncomfortable, but doubled down on the idea that he could be more honest with me than with her. Look, I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Emily. And that's when everything really fell apart. When Emily picked up the phone, I barely had time to gather my thoughts. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I also knew I couldn't ignore what had happened. Keeping it simple, I told her about Jake's messages, how he had reached out late at night, how the conversation had quickly veered into uncomfortable territory, and how I had shut it down. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then her tone shifted. Sharp, almost offensive. She wanted to know exactly what I had said to him, as if I had somehow led him into it. The more I tried to explain, the colder she became. Instead of reacting with concern or anger toward Jake, she turned it on me. She accused me of overstepping, of trying to create a problem where there wasn't one. The suggestion that her husband might have been inappropriate was something she refused to entertain. I hadn't expected gratitude, but I also hadn't expected this. The conversation spiraled quickly. She accused me of trying to make her doubt her own marriage, of acting like I knew better than she did. When I pushed back, she doubled down, insisting that I had misunderstood Jake's words and that maybe I had even wanted to misinterpret them. It was like talking to a stranger. By the time we hung up, I had the sick realization that I hadn't just lost her trust, I had lost my best friend. I thought that would be the worst of it. I was wrong. Because within days, people started acting different around me. Mutual friends seemed distant, their smiles forced. The whispers started before I even had a chance to ask what was going on. At first I thought I was imagining it. The sudden shift in tone, the awkward pauses in conversation, the way people seemed to exchange glances whenever I walked into a room. But it didn't take long to confirm my suspicion. Emily had talked. And whatever she told them, it wasn't the truth. A mutual friend finally let it slip. According to Emily, I had misread the situation, overreacted, and then tried to stir up drama between her and Jake. She framed it as if I had taken an innocent conversation and twisted it into something inappropriate. The worst part? People believed her. Some stayed neutral, unsure of who to side with, but others made up their minds quickly. The shift was subtle at first. Texts left unread, invitations that suddenly never came. Then it became more obvious. Conversations would go quiet when I approached. People I'd known for years started treating me like a troublemaker, someone who had crossed a line that didn't exist. Meanwhile, Jake acted like nothing had happened. The next time I saw him at a group gathering, he barely acknowledged me. But there was something in his expression, something smug, like he knew exactly what he had done and how well it had worked. I thought Emily would at least want to talk again, to work through it. But she didn't. She didn't just distance herself, she blocked me. 10 years of friendship gone overnight. And I was left wondering, had I done the right thing? Or should I have just ignored the messages and pretended like nothing had happened? For days I kept replaying the conversation with Emily in my head, searching for the exact moment things had gone wrong. Maybe I had been too blunt. Maybe I should have softened my words, eased her into the idea instead of dropping it on her like a bomb. Or maybe it wouldn't have mattered. The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew. Someone told me that Emily had framed it as I was the one overstepping with Jake, as if I had been the one seeking attention, misinterpreting a friendly message, trying to insert myself into their marriage. The more I tried to defend myself, the worse it seemed. No one wanted to hear my side. I wasn't used to feeling this alone. For so long, Emily had been my person, the one I could always count on. Now, it felt like I was standing on the outside of my own life, watching everything shift against me. Jake, of course, was completely unaffected. He went on as if nothing had happened while I was left dealing with the fallout. One night, I typed out a long message to Emily, trying one last time to make her understand. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. If she had wanted to hear the truth, she would have listened the first time. But she didn't. And I had to accept that maybe she never really would. At first, I thought I could wait it out, that eventually people would see the truth for themselves, that Emily would cool down, think things through, and realize I wasn't the enemy. But that never happened. Instead, the distance between me and our mutual friends kept growing. People stopped reaching out, stopped inviting me to things. A few were still polite, but it was clear they didn't want to get caught in the middle. Then the final blow came. Someone sent me a screenshot from a group chat, one I used to be part of but had apparently been removed from. Emily had said she was so disappointed in me that she had never expected I would try to sabotage her marriage, that she felt betrayed by someone she once trusted. I just sat there staring at the screen, my stomach twisting into knots. This wasn't just about a misunderstanding anymore. She had turned me into the villain. Jake, of course, remained silent. He didn't have to say anything. He had won without ever having to fight. And that was when it finally hit me. There was no fixing this, no reasoning with her, no coming back from it. Emily had already made up her mind. And if that was the case, then maybe it was time for me to make up mine too. For days I struggled with the urge to fight back. Every time I saw another cold glance from a mutual friend, or felt the weight of silence where there used to be laughter and conversations, the anger bubbled up again. I wanted to send Emily one last message, to demand that she hear me out. I wanted to call out Jake, to make him own up to what he had done. I wanted to clear my name, to somehow undo the damage that had already been done. But deep down, I knew the truth. It wouldn't matter. Emily had already made her choice. So had the people who had distanced themselves from me. Trying to convince them otherwise wouldn't change anything. If they had wanted to hear my side, they would have asked. If they had trusted me, they wouldn't have let one twisted version of events erase years of friendship. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that clinging to the past was only hurting me. I was exhausting myself, replaying conversations that would never change, imagining arguments that would never happen, and waiting for an apology that would never come. So, I made a decision. I stopped checking social media for updates from our old friend group. I stopped waiting for Emily to unblock me. I stopped looking for signs that she might regret what she had done. And the strangest thing happened. I felt lighter. It still hurt, of course. Losing a friendship that had been such a huge part of my life wasn't something I could just move on from instantly. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't drowning in it. The weight of it wasn't pressing down on my chest every second of the day. I realized something important. I wasn't the one who had ruined our friendship. I wasn't the one who had turned my back on years of trust and loyalty. That was on Emily. That was on Jake. That was on the people who had chosen to believe lies over the person they had known for years. And if they had made their choice, then maybe it was time for me to make mine. I wasn't going to keep chasing people who didn't care to hear the truth. I wasn't going to keep feeling guilty for something I never did. It was time to move forward whether they were in my life or not. Letting go wasn't as simple as making a decision. It wasn't like I woke up the next morning completely free from the weight of it all. The truth was, I still felt the loss every time I reached for my phone, expecting to see a message from Emily that would never come. I still hesitated when I passed by the places we used to go together, wondering if she was there with the same people who had shut me out. But I was done letting those thoughts control me, so I started filling the empty spaces. I focused more on work, took on new projects, and reconnected with people I had drifted away from. Not because of drama, but simply because life had taken us in different directions. Some of them had heard what happened, but they didn't press for details. They just welcomed me back, which was more than I could say for the ones who had cut me off without a second thought. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. Then one night, I got a text from an unexpected number. It was from one of our mutual friends, someone who had kept their distance, but hadn't outright shunned me like the others. Their message was short, almost hesitant. I don't know what really happened between you and Emily, but things don't add up. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time. Maybe, just maybe, the truth was starting to crack through the lies. For a long time, I just stared at the message. After everything that had happened, the silent treatment, the side glances, the outright rejection, this felt surreal. Part of me wanted to ignore it. What was the point? If they hadn't cared to hear my side before, why now? But a small, stubborn part of me needed to know. So, I replied. We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop, a place we used to go as a group, but where I hadn't set foot since everything fell apart. I told myself not to expect much. Maybe they were just fishing for details to take back to Emily. Maybe they were feeling guilty for how they had treated me and wanted to clear their conscience. Either way, I walked in with my guard up. The moment we sat down, I could tell something was off. They weren't their usual self, fidgeting with their cup, hesitating before speaking. When they finally did, their voice was careful, measured. They admitted that something about Emily's version of events had never completely sat right. At first they had believed her like everyone else, but over time little things didn't add up. Jake had been acting strange. Emily had been unusually defensive, or even snapping at close friends who asked too many questions. And, most importantly, cracks were starting to show in their relationship. Apparently people had overheard them arguing. A lot. And it wasn't just about me. At first it seemed like normal married couple bickering, but the tension had grown, making everyone around them uncomfortable. I sat there, absorbing it all, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anger. Relief because finally someone else saw it. Anger because it had taken this long for anyone to question things. I wanted to demand why they didn't come to me sooner, why they had let me sit in silence while everyone whispered behind my back. But I held my tongue. Instead, I just asked the one thing that had been haunting me for weeks. Do you believe me now? There was a long pause, then a slow nod. It wasn't much, but it was something. For the first time since this mess began, I felt a shift. The truth wasn't as buried as I had thought. People were starting to see it, and maybe, just maybe, this wasn't over yet. After that first conversation at the coffee shop, I noticed a shift. Small at first, but undeniable. People who had ignored me for weeks suddenly made eye contact again. A few even nodded in my direction, hesitant but acknowledging me in a way they hadn't before. Then came the messages. Some were casual check-ins, as if they were testing the waters. Others were more direct, people who had distanced themselves now wanting to catch up or see how I was doing. I wasn't naive. I knew what was happening. The foundations of Emily's story was starting to crack, and people were scrambling to reassess where they stood. And then, a week later, I got a text from someone I never expected. It was another mutual friend, one who had been firmly in Emily's corner from the beginning, someone who had given me the cold shoulder, who had believed every word she said without question. Now, suddenly, they wanted to meet. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let them sit with the consequences of their blind loyalty. But curiosity got the better of me. We met at a quiet spot, and from the moment they sat down, I could tell something was different. They looked uncomfortable, like they had been holding something in for too long. It didn't take long for them to start talking. Apparently, Emily had become more defensive, more aggressive even. She shut down conversations the moment my name came up. When mutual friends asked why she had cut me off so completely, she got snappy, irritated, like she couldn't handle even the suggestion that she might have been wrong. And Jake? He had been acting strange, too. At first he had played the role of the supportive husband, backing Emily up at every turn. But now people were starting to notice how distant he had become, not just from me, but from her. He wasn't as affectionate, wasn't as involved in group outings. The perfect husband act was slipping. Then came the rumors. At first it was just quiet speculation whispered in the corners of conversations. But now, more people were wondering, was this the first time Jake had done something like this? Had he ever crossed a line before? The idea made my stomach turn. Had Emily ignored other red flags in their marriage? Had she dismissed warnings from other people the way she had dismissed mine? And the final blow came as we were finishing our drinks. The friend hesitated before speaking, lowering their voice like they were revealing something dangerous. Between you and me, they said carefully, I don't think Emily and Jake are doing as well as they want people to believe. I felt a jolt of something. Was it relief? Justification? It was exhaustion. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much the truth was starting to surface, no matter how many people were beginning to question Emily's version of events, the damage had already been done. I had already lost friends. I had already lost her. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure if I cared anymore. For days, the conversation replayed in my head. I should have felt relieved, maybe even triumphant, knowing that people were finally starting to question Emily's story. That Jake wasn't the perfect husband she had painted him to be. That in the end, I hadn't been the problem. But there was no satisfaction in it, because what did it change? The friendships I had lost weren't going to magically return. The people who had turned their backs on me weren't suddenly going to undo the damage they had done. And Emily? Even if she eventually realized the truth about Jake, I knew she would never admit she had been wrong about me. I was finally starting to make peace with that. Then, just as I was settling into the idea that I might never get closure, my phone buzzed. A message. From Emily. For a second, my breath caught in my throat. After everything, after weeks of silence, after being blocked and ignored and villainized, seeing her name again felt unreal. My fingers hovered over the screen, her heart pounding. I told myself not to expect much. Maybe she had sent a short, half-hearted apology. Maybe she wanted to clear her conscience now that the truth about Jake was unraveling. Or maybe she wanted to lash out one last time. Bracing myself, I opened the message. It was just 6 words. I think we need to talk. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened. No sign that she regretted anything. I read it over and over, waiting for some kind of reaction to hit me. Anger, relief, even hope. But all I felt was nothing. She had spent weeks refusing to listen, cutting me off without hesitation. She had made me the villain in a story she refused to question. And now, when things weren't going her way, now she wanted to talk? The realization hit me like a wave. I didn't owe her anything. Not an explanation, not my time, not my forgiveness. If she had really wanted to talk, she would have listened the first time. If she had truly valued our friendship, she wouldn't have thrown it away so easily. I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. 1,000 things ran through my mind. Things I could say, questions I could ask, ways I could make her realize what she had done. But in the end, I did the only thing that felt right. I locked my phone. No response, no second chances. No more waiting for closure that would never come. Emily had already made her choice, and for the first time, I finally made mine. I was done.